Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra Rue. I'm the CEO of Rue Global Impact, and this is Human Potential at Work. I will tell you that I have two guests today. I have Nora, Vele, and I have Don Watson from MEK. And I will also tell you that I have been bugging Nora for years now to please come on the show because MEK is doing incredible things. And then I got the pleasure of being on a panel with Don in Geneva speaking at the UN ILO, and I got to meet him and see how brilliant he is. And so then I started bugging again. So anyway, they have blessed us, and they're actually on to celebrate. We're all going to celebrate the Americans with Disabilities Act 30-year anniversary, which we're recording this on a Thursday and it is Sunday, but we're going to celebrate all year. So Nora and Don, welcome so much to the program. And maybe we could start. We'll let Nora tell us a little bit about her background. And then Don, maybe you could tell us more about your background.
Sure. Thanks, Deb, for having us here. We're really excited to be part of this podcast today. As you know, MEK has been involved in the work of disability inclusion for quite some time. I've been with the company for several decades, and I've had the privilege of working in the Diversity and Inclusion Center of Excellence for quite some time. About 5 years ago, I had an opportunity to lead one of the ambassador teams that reports up to the Chief Diversity Officer, Celeste Warren, specifically focused on disability inclusion. And so that's one of the things that I do here at MEK. In addition to that, I also am the person responsible for the company's affirmative action compliance programs. So I'll turn it over to Don here at MEK.
Thank you, Nora and Deb. Good to see you virtually in this environment. So I'm Don Watson, and I lead MEK's Global Workplace and Enterprise Services Organization. So we have global responsibility for all of MEK's real estate and facility management footprint across the globe. I also am the executive sponsor of our employee business resource group, the MEK Capability Network, and absolutely thrilled to be here spending time with everyone talking about this Americans with Disability Act turning 30, as well as the work we're doing in MEK to create an inclusive environment. Thank you.
Yes, and one reason why I was so insistent about bugging them to be on the show is, first place, Nora and I have known each other for many, many years. I used to sit on the board of the USBL, which is now Disability In, for 6 years, and that's where I first met Nora, and I was just really impressed with what they were doing. And one thing that MEK is doing right, and I really applaud, is they're not just looking at this from a US lens. They really are looking at it at their entire footprint. As Don said, it's global. They're using the word global. So I think what they're doing, not only am I applauding what they're doing, but they actually recently won an award. And I thought maybe we would start with that. And so Nora, I don't know if you want to talk about that award, but that's a really important award. And so congratulations, well deserved. But why don't you or Don tell us about that award?
Sure, I'll start, Don, and then if you want to jump in. So one of the goals of the Global Disability and Inclusion Strategy Council, I think at the time of launch, which was 5 years ago, was to be able to apply for external recognition. And as we worked on our key strategic priorities over the years, last year we came together and we reflected on all of the great work that was happening across the work streams. And we knew we were ready. It was time to apply for some external recognition. There's a saying that we have at MEK, and Celeste Warren often reminds us of it. It's, you want to be sure that your inside voice matches your outside voice. And so I think that our inside voice certainly does match the external recognition that we received. And I am so excited about the recognition. It's quite frankly the highlight of my career. it's something I've always wanted to see, and for it to happen this year really meant a lot to me personally, but also for the council. Don?
Yeah, I would just add that, I mean, I think it's a really great testament to the work that we had to do globally to first even really be considered and then to win. And it, you start thinking about things we're doing in our, in our real estate and facilities footprint with universal design, to the work we're doing with economic inclusion and supplier development, to how we're looking at our digital capabilities and how we transform them, and even to how we partner with different organizations. You mentioned earlier the ILO, what we're doing with Disability In and some others, to really kind of look at this holistically and globally to put us in a position where, as Nora said, our inside voice can really match our outside voice as we go forward.
And one thing that I've always also nagged Nora about is I didn't think we were doing enough to tell people what you're doing. And the reason why I thought it was so important that you really talk about what you're doing is because other companies will learn from you. And so, but y'all didn't say what the award was.
Oh, sorry, I didn't even, the Employer of the Year. Oh, see?
A little hiccup there, but it happens.
Yes.
So it was the Disability In's Employer of the Year, which makes it really, it's a huge deal. I believe, there's like 300 corporations that are involved with the U.S., the USBL, the Disability In is the name, Debra. And I might be wrong, and it might even be more, because I saw information that they had 3,000 people at their recent virtual conference, yay. So yes. One of the biggest, by far the biggest, and y'all won. That's a huge deal to win that. I'm very impressed.
And Debra, I have to share one other thing, because Don will be very humble. But last year, Don was named Executive Sponsor of the Year.
Wow. Yeah, congratulations, Don. And once again, the thing that I love about this story, this is not just smoke and mirrors. I've been shocked at what they've been doing. And once again, nagging Nora to come and talk about it, because I'm not hearing this from other companies. And I'll also say, and Don mentioned it, but they were one of the first company when I got involved with the ILO Global Business Disability Network and said, let's get more US companies. MEK right away was said, okay. And it's a big deal to join it because of the paperwork and what you have to commit to, and it's a really big deal. And a lot of US companies are actually afraid to do it, because if you say that you're going to do all this stuff, it's sort of expected that you do it. And then also, once again, y'all were one of the first to join the Valuable 500. So I just see work leading over and over and over and over and over again, and sponsoring work that really supports people with disabilities. And we just have a lot to talk about, but I wanted to take just a minute at the beginning to really celebrate this, because you won this because you deserve it. This is not a smoke and mirrors award. It's a really big deal, and kudos. So you had mentioned, Nora, the Global Disability Inclusion Strategy Council, and that is the MEK's Global Disability and Strategy Council. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So about close to, I guess, 6 years ago, we came together as an organization because we began to realize that the topic of disability inclusion was more than US focused, and it needed to be looked at more holistically and broadly. We were hearing from our colleagues around the globe that there were needs that they had, and they wanted us to support the work that they needed to do, especially around employment. And Deb, as you know, when we began to have conversations with you, it was difficult to identify the talent pools from which we could recruit. And so we wanted to look at our work that we were doing in the United States and create more of an integrated strategy. So one thing that we embarked upon was an organizational assessment we conducted in 2014, and we looked at all of our policies and practices and procedures to look at where we were doing well and where we had an opportunity to improve. Once we completed that assessment, we brought together a group of thought leaders, and these are cross-functional leaders within the organization that have the decisions or the decision rights, within their functions and the influence. And we knew how important that was to have the right people at the table when we brought these different groups together. Quite frankly, at the time, I don't know that we knew this was going to become the Global Disability and Inclusion Strategy Council. After our first meeting, the ask of these leaders was to go back out and create a 5-year plan to address the gaps that we identified. And there were about 29 areas of focus that we identified. And as Don mentioned earlier, in areas that focused on facilities management, on information technology, health and benefits, recruitment. And when these plans were developed, we brought everyone back together to share what it was that they were going to commit to. And it was at that point that I believe that the council was born, because we realized we needed to be focused, we needed to be intentional, and we needed to meet with each other regularly so that we could ensure that this work was being completed, and we needed to support each other as well. There was a lot we didn't know, and we were learning from each other, which was really phenomenal.
And I think sometimes the community says, come on, you big corporations, you global corporations, you got to make sure you include us. But what we sometimes don't realize is all the moving parts that have to be considered. And I think MEK has done a really good job with that. And I don't know, Don, if you want to come in and just talk a little bit about that. And also to both of you, I know that your CEO, Ken Frazier, has just been very supportive. Once again, you were one of the first U.S. companies that, joined the ILO GBDN. You were one of the first American companies that joined the Valuable 500. You are very supportive of Disability:IN and other organizations. So all I can say is I wish other companies would follow your lead, because it appears to me that you're really focused on this from all the important points, and it's sort of becoming a DNA. It's sort of the DNA of MEK. And, Don, let me, turn it to you, and then Nora, if you want to come in.
Yeah, if I think about the company's kind of leadership commitment to this, I'm going to start with kind of the MEK Capability Network, which is the EBRG. That I lead. I mean, that group, it really is, it's an inclusive network that really is offering a forum to colleagues with a disability and their family members or allies to really support professional development and, creating an inclusive environment. It also works very closely with our Diversity and Inclusion Strategy Council and teams from that perspective to really, help shape strategy and the things that we're going to do. They also are really good corporate ambassadors for us, both internally and externally. And an example of that is work that we do here in New Jersey with the Union County Performing Arts Center with Rahway, where they actually design programs for children and adults with autism and other sensory sensitivities. And we're really big supporters of them. We work hand in hand to hold that together. But if you look at that chapter, there's 11 chapters in the US right now, and there are 9 chapters external US in Europe, Asia Pacific, Japan, Latin America. We have about 627 members. In 2020, with all the craziness that's going on with COVID, that membership has grown 16%. And if you just look at over the last year, it's grown 40%. And it includes now a virtual kind of a virtual capability network group that really makes up our sales force within the U.S. And that's kind of a new one where, where if you think about working virtually now and doing all these things, even this network that we have within the capability group is setting themselves up because they're spread out all over the different place for their sales territories. So, I think that group has done a tremendous job in helping us lead and move forward as we've been on that. And I think without that, the strong work of that group, getting to a position where we could sign the charter with the Global Business and Disability Network, with the ILO, and join the valuable 500 would have been a harder thing for us to do. So, I really commend the leaders that we have there. Charlie Hudson, who's the current capability leader for the overall global network, for the work that they're doing. And, I'll pause there. And Nora, if there's anything that you kind of want to add or build on, please go ahead.
I think you said it well, Don. One of the things that I think differentiates us in terms of the work that we've been doing is that Don was able to mobilize a global organization to focus on disability and inclusion through this model. And it really was a brilliant idea, because now you have boots on the ground working this every single day. And the support that's been provided by Don's team to the various employee resource group chapters has just been phenomenal. We've been able to execute extremely well because of this model.
It really is an impressive model. Once again, I remember standing outside in Richmond nagging Nora about, and when she was telling me what she was doing, I'm like, please, will you come and talk about it? So anyway, so I'm glad they did. But I have a couple of questions to ask you guys, just sort of to understand the size of MEK. I have two questions about MEK, and then I have another question. How many countries is MEK in, and approximately how many employees? And then I have a separate question to ask. Don made me think of it when he was talking about what they were doing, but I have been hearing from other corporations that more of their employees are actually self-identifying during the COVID-19. And I was just curious if that was something you're seeing as people are working virtually. So I will turn it over to Don, and then Nora, you come in as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't have the exact country number in my head, but I will tell you, obviously, we're all over Europe, we're all over Latin America, we're all over Asia. And then obviously within the US, Canada, I believe our employee number, and Nora, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's hovering somewhere in the 70,000 to 80,000 employees within MEK. Now, obviously, there's also a large, we do work with strategic partners and different companies that kind of also work with us. So once you start adding contractors and everything in there, that number absolutely, starts to grow from there. And I would just say, even in those relationships, we're really trying to partner with them to think about employment for persons with disability, and how we can work together as just kind of that next generation, where not only are we thinking about this in terms of what are we doing in MEK, but also what are we doing with our external partners who perform services for us, to learn what they're doing and or help them on this journey.
And so I'm going to totally jump in front of Nora and say, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, this is what separates MEK from the others, because not only are they doing it globally, not just in the US, not just in the UK, but all of these different things, and they're having their employees help them. But at the same time, then they're taking it to their vendors and their partners and saying, yeah, but we really need y'all to do that as well. So this is what leadership looks like. This is why they're winning the awards. This is why I'm so blessed to have them on the program. But let me turn it over to you, Nora.
Sure. So I believe, Don, we're in more than 140 countries around the globe. And as far as, I'm trying to remember now, Deb, what you asked, it just went out of my head.
Well, I was curious if you're seeing that more of your employees are self-identifying. I just thought that was so interesting. I understand why, because what they're realizing is, as they go home, things have to be accessible. We've been nagging about accessibility for a long time, and I know you are really, we're going to talk about that, about accessibility and universal design and all of that stuff. But people are realizing that telework is an accommodation, and it actually, and we're seeing business after business tell us that their employees, even going home in this crisis with all the unknowns and the technology problems and the connectivity problems, people are being more productive, which is fascinating to employers. I was just curious if y'all had seen any of those trends.
So what I would say is, anecdotally, we've heard of employees who now have been raising up, not so much concerns, but requests for accommodations that maybe they otherwise would not have requested if they were in the office. We've learned a lot too about the needs of employees, whether they have self-identified or not, because as you mentioned, working in a virtual world has really changed up how we work together, how we think about accessibility, and it has definitely, had an impact on us. It's raised tremendous awareness in the organization in terms of the needs and how we need to be thinking about this. We will be launching our SelfID campaign come September. So we're very curious about whether or not we'll see a significant uptick in participation now that folks are, working remotely.
Nora, do you mind just, and I know you're going to do it in September, so don't let me get ahead of it, but could you give us just a little bit more information about this self-ID campaign? Because of course, self-IDing in the United States, it's tricky business. It's tricky business for the employers. It's tricky business for the individuals. And so it's something that a lot of companies really struggle with.
Yeah, so we've had a high degree of success with our self-ID campaigns in the past, but for this one, we made a decision to think about what is the with them, the what's in it for me for employees. How could we encourage them to participate and want to check the box? Now, unlike some companies, we take a very holistic approach to self-identification. So when we go out, we're asking on all dimensions of diversity, including LGBTQ status and gender identity. And so what we did this time was we held focus groups with the various constituencies to get their feedback on the communication plan that we were developing. We got a lot of rich feedback from the various constituencies, and they were honest with us. In some cases, the previous message sounded much more compliance oriented, and we wanted it to feel more authentic. We wanted employees to feel that they belong here. And so the feedback that we've gotten, we've incorporated into the campaign. Like I said, we'll be launching in September. I believe that the work that we're doing in the area of mental health is going to help us address the lack of participation from colleagues who may have a diagnosis of a mental health condition. Because we're trying to normalize the conversation, we've gotten tremendous feedback from our employees about the topic of mental health. And we've even launched a network called the Mindwell Champions based on work we had done in the mental health space. I believe that that will help increase the numbers of employees who now check the box as I have a disability.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the intersectionality of diversity and inclusion, because we're seeing the diversity groups forgetting to support each other's and their allies, and that we have intersectionality. So Don, I don't know if you wanted to make any comments.
Yeah, I wanted to just jump, one of the things when we think about self-ID, and I was reflecting on this, and this is kind of a recent example where we actually had an employee, I think it was towards the end of last year, early this year, come forward and say that he, had been uncomfortable for a while, but had seen the work we were doing and got to a point where, he was comfortable talking about it, and he wanted to help us in this journey. And I think, that was, at least in my time, and that was the first time I had experienced something like that. And it was, it was kind of affirming to kind of know, okay, we're doing a lot of the right things, because we took someone who was not at a place of comfort and got them to a place of comfort where they did want to sit down with us and talk about, kind of some of the things that challenge them in the work environment, but also continue to help us move this journey forward with their ideas. So, you know, that for me, from just a personal perspective, was really kind of that powerful message of, hey, you guys you're on the right track here. Keep going, keep listening, keep learning, keep looking for those opportunities. So I just wanted to kind of add that as part of this discussion.
And that's really powerful. I just learned that I have dyslexia. And I learned just a couple of years ago that I have ADHD, because, you know what, we all have interesting brains, but it makes sense to me on certain things. I know Doug and I were talking about, we were laughing about how there's certain words I can't seem to pronounce. And I mispronounced this one word 131 times when I did my audiobook for inclusion branding. I fixed it, but this word that I thought was pronounced important, apparently is pronounced important. So that's the dyslexia working on my brain, but I was never diagnosed. So it's just interesting to learn about our brains. And Don, I think that's such a beautiful story, because allowing people to come out and just be who they are as humans. You're not broken. That's just the way you're made. So I think that's powerful. I have an important question for you, Don, just because this is something that's so near and dear to my heart, but let's talk a little bit more about accessibility. You know, digital accessibility, content accessibility. I know this is another commitment that you make. I remember talking to Nora years ago about videos and captioning, and when I was hearing companies say, oh, it's so hard. And, you know, so I think you're a real best practice in that area too. So do you mind talking a little bit about that? And Nora, if you want to come in after Don.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll spend some time talking about accessibility. And I definitely think when you look at the digital side of it, it's challenging. You know, what we found in our organization is that, you know, it wasn't just the IT organization that was creating content. So it was really one of those situations where, you know, we had to understand who was creating the contact, how to connect with those folks, how to have these discussions, how to set up, you know, the policies, the procedures. And I know Nora can talk a lot about this topic too, because it has been something that I think for us, you know, started as this, hey, let's just make sure all of our content is digitally accessible, and quickly morphed into the reality of trying to do that in a large, you know, global organization with a lot of different owners. So, you know, I think we continue to work very hard at it. We continue to educate. We continue to try to make, you know, necessary changes, and making sure that, you know, our policies and procedures really are lined up so that it starts to happen naturally. And I think, you know, that's the journey that, you know, kind of from my perspective with digital accessibility, that we continue to be on. If I pivot real quickly to just kind of the overall concept of universal design and what we're doing in the built environment, you know, it really continues to be that process of creating an environment that enables and empowers a population by improving, you know, by giving them the ability to improve their performance, their health, their wellness, their safety, and their social participation by removing barriers. And so we've really taken that to heart in terms of our engineering design standards, and we have built a universal design process into our global engineering standards. So every building or location, when we fit it out, it does go through a universal design process. We work with we're training our AEs and our architectural firms to design that way, so that we can kind of ensure that our facilities are accessible to anyone when they come in. And whether we know they need an accommodation or whether we don't know, you know, it should be intuitive for them to navigate our facilities. And again, this is a learning process. You know, there'll be mistakes, there'll be things we don't get right. But it is a commitment we've made, and we demonstrated it, in my view, by really making sure it was part of our engineering standards. So Nora, I'll kind of pause, and if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Sure. So Deb, you and I have partnered on digital accessibility, you know, years back. And I think what we learned as part of the council was that this was a very complicated topic. So we decided that we had to take an approach. One, I think an aha moment for us was that we assumed that anyone touching technology would understand what it meant to be accessible. And we learned that that's not the case. So in our first year working on this, we decided that we wanted to launch an awareness campaign with our colleagues in the IT organization. In that space, we participated in a really cool, I guess it's a weekly session that the IT organization runs. It's called TED Talk. And each Tuesday at 10 a.m. in the morning, global colleagues from around the world join in, and we were able to talk about the topic of accessibility with our colleagues. We were, in fact, invited back after that session to do what is called a tech walk. And we walked them through some of the technologies that MEK has on its platform that already comes delivered with accessible functionality. So for instance, when you think about the Microsoft suite of tools, Microsoft's done an amazing job in delivering a product that can be enabled to be accessible, and you can check to see if the content you're developing is accessible. From there, we then hosted an empathy lab, and we brought in those leaders that were in charge of, let's say, the brand teams or the marketing functions, where they were having someone else develop content on the company's behalf, but needed to understand what accessibility actually meant. And so in hosting this empathy lab, I think there were a lot of aha moments for those that joined us during that session. We were really proud as we moved along on this journey when we were able to have our system development lifecycle committee agree to publish guidelines around WCAG 2.1 AA standards, so that others could learn what's required when you are involved in either developing content or if you're procuring content. From there, I had an opportunity, and it was really through Don's introduction, to meet someone who was working on a different project in the company, and it was involving looking at our digital assets from an enterprise governance framework perspective. After meeting with him, I invited him to join our council, and he immediately saw the importance of carving out accessibility as one of the attributes of the framework. So it wasn't embedded in the diversity and inclusion section of the framework in terms of how we think about content development. It actually had its own section for others to better learn about what's required. And as we move on to integration and adoption, we are now in the early stages of developing company policy around this. And just like Don's work is done on a global basis, so shall this digital accessibility work will be done on a global basis.
A question that I have, once again, you're leading in so many ways, and I know that you have some best practices, and I'm hoping that you might give me some links that we can include with the episode so that people can see them. But at the same time, you're leading by being part of these national and global groups, and so I'm curious what you and Don think about. You know, what is the commitment to companies like MEK to be engaged in the national and global conversations and leading? And at the same time, what are benefits to companies like MEK to learn and have access to other leaders in your space and other spaces and assets? I was just curious because you've been very, you've led in so many ways, almost more than any other company I can think of. So I was just curious if you'd talk about how it's been beneficial to you and how you think you've given back. And at the same time, has anything surprised you about being engaged with these groups?
So I'll start. I would say a huge aha moment for me was that first ILO charter signing meeting for the Global Business and Disability Network. that for me was really the first time that I was in a discussion about this topic on a global scale, and really meeting, even the NGO organizations that were working in these countries, and really kind of just hearing about the different challenges that really do exist. And then but I think the networking piece of that was huge. So when we started thinking about our capability chapter in India, it was very good having met some folks who were in the Asia Pacific region in India, who I could connect my facility lead to in India, to really have this discussion locally about how do you go about setting up kind of this chapter in India. What are some of the things, because he was approaching this from a novice perspective. So him being able to connect with someone in region to start this discussion was much more valuable than him trying to talk to me from a US perspective when I don't understand what's going on, to the fullest extent in India and the region. So that for me is the power of being involved in this at a global scale, and working with organizations like the International Labor Organization and even the Valuable 500, is that perspective really comes across, and you start to make the connections who can really help you in these different regions of the world.
Good answer. Good answer, Don. Nora, you want to comment on it?
Yeah, I have to agree with Don. We didn't have all the answers, to what we wanted to accomplish, and having these networks that you could tap into. I've actually made friends with folks from different companies where we can just pick up the phone and have a chat and check in with each other, and share our challenges, share our successes. How did you go about approaching this? I'm running into a roadblock. Can you help me think it through? That's the value of being able to network, with various organizations through these organizations that we're a part of.
Yeah, I think it's very important. And I kept saying to American companies, please join the global conversations, because not only will you add value, but you'll learn. And I loved the point Don was making. And instead of us saying, okay, well, let me tell you how it works in the US, when we're talking about India or Bangladesh or China, or it really, really, really does matter, speaking culture to culture. So, well, let's talk a little bit about COVID-19. So, we know that people with disabilities were unemployed at a much higher rate than their non-disabled peers. And how are you finding? And I know a lot of people are really nervous in this new environment because we don't even know what's going on. But are you finding that once again, you had talked about more people self-identifying, but how is it working for your employees with and without disabilities that went home? And let's talk just a little bit about how this is all working during COVID-19. And I know that's a big question, but
So I'll start, and then I'll quickly probably hand off to Nora on this one. Listen, I think, globally, I think we are learning a lot, and I think Nora kind of commented on this earlier about our accommodations processes. And from my perspective, I think we were much better prepared for this from an accommodations process in the US than we were the rest of the world. And, we quickly had to figure that out. I would probably still argue that if, as this looks like this is going to continue and we're going to have to think about it, that's probably going to be an area that we're going to continue making improvements to and really thinking about, because the return to the office is going to look very different. And even where in parts of the world where we have returned to the office, it's not 100%, it's maybe 20% or 50%. So I think the accommodations process, at least in the near term, has probably been the biggest challenge and the thing that we have to continue to work through. And again, as you said, this can be for someone who has a disability or someone who doesn't have a disability. But now we're asking people to really work from home, continue to be productive, continue to drive MEK's mission forward, and ensuring that they have the right tools to do that in a safe manner, and thinking about their health and their well-being continues to be important. And then, obviously, and I'll pause here and let Nora jump in. Obviously now thinking about the mental health aspects of everyone having to work from home, and dealing with either elderly care that you might have to do, or your child's education, or hey, you don't really have the home that's the size where you can have a private place to go have a call or a video. That's something else that obviously is a continuing discussion as we move through this.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is because we had launched the work around mental health prior to COVID, we were prepared in terms of many resources that could be made available for employees to leverage. In the beginning of all of this, I think it was sort of novel for us to be home. We were baking banana breads, and we were on Zoom calls, and we were doing things and posting to social media about what it was like to be home. And then as the weeks progressed, it got harder. And there were employees who reached out to me who were saying, I'm really having a hard time with this. And so we reminded them about our EAP resources. We expanded different types of coverages and offerings so that employees could manage, and also thinking about them in terms of their families and giving benefits to them, even if they were not, someone who was in the immediate family, but actually happened to live in their homes. They were entitled to leverage these benefits. So it's been an evolution for us. We've tried different things. We've run webinars. We've given access to these online exercise platforms. I tried a few of those, and mindfulness moments, and really giving people the chance to have that self-care, because that is so important. The one thing I will say, though, about all of this in terms of COVID-19, one of the things I'm really proud of, our summer interns that were offered opportunities to come and work for us still had the opportunity to be part of an internship program this summer. Our talent acquisition function did an amazing job of creating a virtual experience for everyone. And Don, I know you have an intern on your team. So when you think about being innovative and thinking out of the box, we are constantly thinking about ways that, we can be inclusive. And I think this was a really great example of that.
Yeah, I just am so impressed with MEK, and I've been impressed for a long time. This didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen overnight. It took years and years and years. But let's talk a little bit about the 8830. So what are y'all going to do to celebrate the 88th, the Americans with Disabilities Act 30-year anniversary? Because I actually think the people that fought to get the Americans with Disabilities Act passed would just be delighted to see what a company like MEK has done to really, really, truly make disability inclusion and accessibility and all of the intersectionalities, and really make it part of who you are. I just think they would be really impressed. This is probably would be one of the greatest dreams that they had come true. So kudos. But so Nora and Don, what are y'all going to do to celebrate the 8830?
So I know that we've been working with the Employee Resource Group to think about how we can continue to promote 8830. We have an internal channel where we can post blogs about 8830, and it's not just a one-day event, right? It's something you celebrate every single day. And the work that we're doing to improve disability inclusion at MEK and MSD is really a great example of how you celebrate this, not just in the US, but outside the US as well. Don, I know that you're going to be part of a panel that's coming up where we're collaborating with one of our external partners on to talk about 8830.
Yeah, and I think that's, I think a lot of it for me is really about, that we're talking about it. I mean, we're really trying to be purposeful. I think, over the last couple of days, there have been more things that have come out from us from MERK's kind of media feed channels, really talking about the work we're doing, not only with disability inclusion, but the support for ADA 30. So I think, we're really trying to be really focused and purposeful in our communications and how this is really a great thing and it is something to be celebrated, but also with that eye of, it just doesn't stop, when this month ends. It's how do we keep kind of building that inclusive environment and creating those opportunities. And I'll be honest, as I continue to reflect on it and I think about this, I think mentoring is one of the big areas that we can continue to really support folks. I currently am mentoring someone through Disability In, and this is one of their next generation leaders. The kid is brilliant. In meeting with him, PhD, going to be a PhD, probably knows more about chemistry and chemical engineering and things that I do. But it's just a great conversation that him and I are having. And, it's weird because we're doing it just like this. There is, I don't have the opportunity to go meet him. He doesn't have the opportunity to meet me. But, I think the exchange of ideas and understanding as he's thinking about transitioning to the workplace and where he needs help and, how we've been talking about interviewing and preparing and connecting him with different leaders in MERK to just kind of understand potential career paths. I think that to me is an area that, as I think about how do you go beyond ADA 30, it's really kind of that mentoring piece that I think there's a huge opportunity for people to be more engaged in and really share their experiences.
Yeah, I remember when I was on the board, we were so proud of those interns, and it's become even more powerful. It's a really amazing program. And like you said, the candidates that are in there are so impressive. But I know that we're almost out of time. So what I'd like to do is I'd like Nora and Don, I'd like y'all just to do a quick summary of, what are you the most proud of MERK about? Just do a little, because this is a really big deal, and such kudos to both of you and everybody that's involved with this. But if you could just take a moment to tell us why you're proud of being part of this and what it means to you. And then also, are there links? I mean, do we go to just merk.com, or, maybe you could talk about your social media links or any recommended links that people would go to too. And as for the audience, we'll make sure that when we publish this on the website, that we will put a link to their big award that they won. And also, I know they have best practices and stuff, and we'll make sure we provide those links as well, so that it's very easy for you to go in and learn more about the amazing work they're doing. So Nora, why don't we start with you, and then we'll turn it over to Don.
Yeah, it's hard to pick one thing, because in everything we've done, we've had an impact and a significant impact, whether it's built environment, digital, recruitment. But one thing I will say that I'm proud of is we were bold a few years back, and we put an inclusion rider in our contracts with our vendors to say that if you perform work for MERK at our locations, we want you to show good faith effort in terms of hiring persons with disabilities. We have an amazing collaboration between the suppliers, as well as with an organization called Best Buddies. And this organization has enabled us to extend offers for internships and actually permanent hires through the vendors organization. So if there was one thing I am most proud of, is that this was something different for us to attempt to do. Of course, we had Don's support, and it's all about leadership. If you don't have leadership, you will struggle. And I'm blessed every day getting to work with Don. So we had his support. we went after it, and the collaboration we have now with our suppliers is phenomenal.
Yeah, my daughter, Sarah, born with Down syndrome, she was a Best Buddy ambassador for VCU for Virginia for a while, but she loved it. It was a wonderful program. So Don, over to you.
Yeah, so I mean, the universal design as a global standard for me is a standout achievement for where we are. I mean, we literally went from knowing nothing about universal design to, you know, working with different partners to learn and training people and bringing in people to actually assess what we were doing and show us where we were missing the mark, and then help us build out the standards to the point where it is a global standard. I mean, if I do a project in Japan, if I do a project in Mexico, if I do a project any place in Europe, it is going to be run from the same perspective of universal design. It's going to go through the same checks, and we're going to ensure that we have those principles in place. And I think, you know, the people in our organization, from global engineering, from my organization, from our environmental health and safety folks, have really partnered to ensure that we get that done. And so I just, that for me is, you know, I never kind of, I think when we started down the road of this, you know, I wasn't even thinking about how it would become a global engineering standard for us. And yet here we are. It's embedded in how we build. And, you know, I think that to me is just something that I've been impressed with, how as an organization, we really took it from, again, knowing nothing to, you know, really embedding it into the culture of how we design and build our facilities.
Very impressive, very impressive. So we're going to provide links. Nora and Don are both on LinkedIn, so you can connect with them there. And we'll also provide information. But thank you for everything you've done. You actually give us hope that it's possible to do this, because there's so many moving parts with these gigantic companies. It's very, very complicated. When you take it out one piece at a time and you do one thing, that's okay, but they're not. They're doing billions and millions of these things. And I also thought it was a very good point that y'all brought up about the accommodations, how all of the work that you did for the accommodations for all employees wound up being such an asset when everybody went home during COVID-19. So kudos for that. And thank you so much for the leadership. So I'm going to let you go, but I'm hoping y'all might come back on later, maybe after COVID-19, and tell us more. But bravo, 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 and congratulations for all the successes. You're making such a huge difference in people's lives. So thank you both very much for being on the show today.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you, Deb. Great to be here. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.